Loan Scheme Exemptions and Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment Bill be now read a second time. The measures in this bill are part of continuing efforts to ensure that the student loan scheme is managed in an efficient and consistent way. They include a suite of mainly technical changes to the repayment rules to ensure that the law is clear, consistent and that it operates as intended. The bill also extends interest-free loans to borrowers from Niue, the Cook Islands and Tokelau, which share a special relationship with New Zealand, which is sometimes referred to as being part of the realm of New Zealand. I note, Mr Speaker, when I used that phrase in an earlier debate, Mr Hayes, I think it was, took some exception to that term, but I quickly reminded him that it is the phrase that the Governor-General often refers to in such situations, and without bringing him into the debate, I think it's appropriate to follow his guidance. And so, because the Ross dependency is also part of the realm of New Zealand, borrowers who go there may also qualify for an interest-free loan. The 183-day requirement to be present in their country is the same criterion that must be met by New Zealand-based borrowers to qualify for interest-free loan status. And that requirement is in place to encourage borrowers to remain in New Zealand or to return home from overseas to make their contribution to our economy and growth. Mr Speaker, the bill applies the same 183-day requirement to borrowers from what we now describe as realm countries, so they have an incentive to return home after their study and make a positive contribution towards the economic and social future of their particular country. This bill also acknowledges the value that students who pursue further study overseas bring to New Zealand, and extends interest-free loans to include students furthering their education overseas through full-time study under formal exchange.
Would members go outside if they're going to stand with their backs to me?
As I was saying, sir, this bill also acknowledges the contribution that students who further their studies overseas bring to the country by extending interest-free loans to include those students who further their education overseas through full-time study under formal exchange programs or formal agreements between New Zealand and overseas tertiary education providers. Mr Speaker, I want to acknowledge the work of the Select Committee on this bill, which made several worthwhile refinements to it. The first of these extends the overseas exemption to include those engaged in full-time study overseas if their New Zealand tertiary provider has confirmed that their studies cannot be completed in New Zealand but would count towards a New Zealand qualification at level 8 or above. The other small but important change provides greater clarity by defining the term overseas tertiary provider, so it is clear what type of organisation borrowers must be engaged in full-time study with overseas in order to qualify for interest-free loan status. The remaining changes in the bill are largely of a technical or remedial nature to ensure that the law works as intended. Briefly, they include an amendment to correct an unintended change to the hardship relief provisions made by the Student Loan Scheme Amendment Act 2007, a change that allows Inland Revenue to raise the compulsory deduction rate from 10% to 15% to help ensure that borrowers pay their correct loan repayment amounts, and the removal of a technicality so that borrowers returning to New Zealand who wish to fully repay their loans before they have met the 183-day requirement to qualify for an interest-free loan can now do so. So they are the main features of the bill. As I say, I want to record my thanks to the Select Committee for its detailed consideration of this matter, for its thoughtful recommendations that have made for further improvement and clarity in this legislation. I think overall these changes will help ensure that the student loan scheme works in the way intended for both borrowers and the Crown, and I consequently, with great pleasure, commend this bill to the House.
Mr Speaker.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Honourable Marianne Street.
Thank you, Mr